This is Sean Kelly, and I'm on Talk About Rock.
Today's guest is a Juno-nominated Canadian musician. He was inducted in Canada's Walk of Fame as a member of Lee Aaron's band. By day, he's a music teacher. He's also the author of Battle Axes, a hard rockin' history of Pointy guitars, which examines the cultural and musical impact of iconic guitars for the 70s and 80s. Joining us, let's welcome Sean Kelly. Sean, man, how are you?
Robert, good to see you, man. Doing very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely great to have you, man. So let's get right into this, man. So what is the allure and significance of Pointy guitars? Obviously, a very distinct symbol of rock music, particularly in the 80s, such iconic different models like the Charvel Star, the Explorer, the Flying V. What makes this pop so much nowadays?
Well, they for me, those guitars came into my life during the cultural zeitgeist of the 80s, like you said, when, the visual aspects of MTV were so important. It was basically showing you how to listen as a young rocker in the 80s. So I'm hearing this amazing music that's electrifying me, and I'm seeing so many of the players playing it with these space-aged guitars, right? These instruments that don't look like, the guitar I see the guy playing at church in the choir. This looked like something different. This was dangerous, edgy, literally, And for me, that's where it began, with the beginning of what I call the pop metal explosion of the 80s. But it goes back further. And of course, it was very interesting to dive in and look at the history of where these guitars come from and what the inspiration was for the people who designed them, the people who played them. And that's what the book's all about.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about some of the people that you mentioned in here and some of their opinions on some stuff here. So you wrote that Steve Brown from Trickster recalled being inspired by Eddie Van Halen. His use of guitars, obviously, a profound impact, personalizing it. One of the first musicians really to kind of do that and make that their own in a way that was really outstanding.
Yeah, well, Steve's an interesting guy because he was somebody when you read the book and you hear him talking about his love for people like Rick Nielsen at Cheap Trick and Eddie Van Halen and Matthias Japs from the Scorpions, you can actually hear that in Steve's writing and in his playing. You can hear those influences, and and he was very, very vocal about the influence the image of those bands had, the arena rock experience. And, those guitars really are a big part of that. Dean Zielinski from Dean Guitars says in my book, he wanted something that someone could see from the back of an arena and recognize as a Dean guitar, Yeah. So those instruments became more than just sonic purveyors of ideas. They became visual purveyors of ideas and concepts.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned Rick Nielsen of Cheap Trick. Obviously, his guitars, super iconic, right? Nobody has designs like he does. Who's on the stage when he has one of his double guitars. He's so many different models and styles. Very eclectic and very cool.
Yeah, man. And his long-suffering guitar tech has to bring out that fine neck guitar every night. But then Rick does have to play it too. So, it's amazing. But yeah, there's an example of a guy who totally gets it. The joy of ownership, the joy of discovery. He worked closely with, the Hammer guitars and many companies to come up with these iconic shapes, And really, he's done as much as anybody has for bringing odd-shaped guitars, the futuristic guitars that Gibson came up with way back in the 50s to the forefront.
Yeah, definitely. And you also wrote for Guitar World magazine about guitar shapes, how they were reimagined, the finish, the flashy paint jobs, obviously the graphics that made the electric guitar the ultimate symbolic accessory of the rock star, right?
Yeah, well, I didn't write for Guitar World, but certainly I had my friend Paul Riario, who's an editor at Guitar World. He dove right into the book, wrote a beautiful foreword, and he was definitely somebody who was inspired by those. Even though at first, I think Paul says himself, I was more of a Les Paul guy, more of a Strat guy, a classic guy, but definitely saw the appeal in those flashy kind of shapes and those flashy paint jobs. I mean, really, a lot of guitar, you can compare guitars to hot rods, right? That
Exactly.
customization culture, especially in California, you customize your surfboard, you customize your hot rod, you customize your guitar to make it do what you want, to make it look like a representation of who you are.
Yeah. So speaking of customization, let's talk a little bit about it. So some of the ones that are real iconic, obviously, Eddie Van Halen for his Frankenstein guitar, and Randy Rhoads with the polka dots on there, kind of kickstarted really the trend of personalizing, I think, the guitars at that point for sure.
I totally agree. I kind of say that with Randy, with what ultimately became the Randy Rhoads model, it's kind of the ultimate pointy guitar, right? The ultimate expression, because offset, angular, sharp, has the visual appeal. The polka dot guitar, that his first V, that was actually designed by Carl Sandoval, but just as iconic. And same thing with Eddie. Those stripes, it became a representation of what you were hearing. And it just so happened that both of those guys were incredibly innovative and important guitar players.
Yeah, and now you can just see those designs and see those patterns, and that's related right to the artist. You know what I mean? When you see those red and white stripes, that's related to Edward, definitely, and the same thing, obviously, with the polka dots for sure.
Exactly.
Another thing I want, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, it lets the player, a young player, have ownership of that identity for a little while. Like that's something that means so much to you. You can tap into a piece of that and hold it in your hand. It's pretty special.
Yeah. And another thing I wanted to touch on also is some of the artists who kind of build their guitars from the ground up, obviously a la Edward Van Halen and Brian May also, of course, designing their own stuff. They weren't happy with what was in the marketplace at the time. And Edward's quoted as saying, he didn't play with effects, although we know there were some effects on the music. But he said he didn't use effects for a lot of his stuff. It was just his guitar and his amp, to get a lot of that.
Yeah, he was a guy who didn't use an overdrive pedal, which is kind of crazy because he's got the kind of the most sought after overdriven guitar sound of all time, right? But really was the relationship between the guitar and the amp. Yeah, he had an Echoplex in there and a Phase 90 maybe, but really it was about his fingers, the guitar, and that amplifier, the direct connection. And I think his design, him taping it and painting his guitar with a Schwinn bicycle paint, which is not really great stuff to paint a guitar with, but he did it. That speaks to who he was. He was an innovator. He was someone he's a tone chaser, as Stephen Rosen would say in his great book.
Yeah, we had him on the show, Stephen. Yeah, that was great. Love his book, man. Yeah,
great book. But that's it. These guys were chasing something, and I think it's the same holds true for the designers I talked to in the book. They were chasing an ideal. It's always sound married with the beauty of the geometry, with the wood, the sonics. Like those things all come together.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of maybe something we've lost with some of the newer music and the newer artists. Obviously, the 80s were kind of known for big hair, loud in your face music, and all this style. So that obviously fit right in with that. But we kind of don't seem to have that as often nowadays. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think it is there, and I think it's there in many fragmented places. So I think that we don't share the same experience the way we used to, where we're all watching MTV or we're all listening to a certain radio station. We kind of create our own universes now, which has good qualities and bad qualities, right? So you're seeing there are kids out there who look like they stepped right out of a hot tub time machine, and they're, you go on Instagram and they've got a Jackson or a Charvel or a BC Rich, and they're playing covers of 80s songs and reimagining 80s things, or the 70s or the 60s, whatever floats their boat. So I think what you're seeing is more small tail stuff. You're seeing concentrated groups of people who like that and can share it themselves within social media, as opposed to going through a big gatekeeper like a record company, for example, who would put it out to the masses. So I think it's there. I think it's different, and there are wonderful things about that, and there are some things that are lost. Because what's lost to me is the greater sense of community, like where everybody your age group's going to be at the Van Halen concert or the Ozzy concert, So, I think it's the natural evolution of where technology took us.
Yeah, definitely. And the one thing I have noticed recently in the last couple of years, some younger folks are so embracing like old metal, old rock. They're using that style. They're looking that style, and that's kind of what they draw their inspiration on. And so it's still great to see that in some of these younger bands. Obviously, making their rounds on social media a couple weeks ago. A lot of the auditions for Quiet Riot with John Tora, still having that style and that sound and still chasing that, gives people like me a lot of hope for that music we grew up and love, that's still an inspiration to a younger generation, which is very cool.
Yeah, isn't he a talented young guy, right? Like, I mean, and he can do anything. Like, he can sound like Tom Kiefer. He can sound like, Bon Jovi. He can Skid Row. Like, I mean, it was Vince Neil, Blackie Lawless. I went down a rabbit hole watching him. And you know what I love most about it was the joy he was taking from it, and as a teacher, that's kind of something I tell the kids, a lot of my students, because this is the music I love, the music of the 70s and the 80s. I help introduce them sometimes. And they get hip to it, but they also hit me to stuff. But to see the joy of creation, and I really think that's where, in a world that's, we hear about a lot about AI and things, but I think what will always keep live music alive and people playing instruments is there's this wonderful feeling of the process of creating the sound yourself, your fingertips, your heartbeat, the way you feel tempo, all those things going into an instrument, and you're creating the sound, and then doing that with other people is an experience that, can't be replicated by AI. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I've discussed it with a couple different artists, kind of to get their take as AI, started to rear its head, and now it's bleeding into every aspect of our life. But like you said, you can't get that emotional feeling from something created artificially. It has to be a real artist. It has to be their instruments, their feelings, their experiences that bring this music alive. That's what we need to keep seeing. I think there'll be a shift eventually, and we will see more of that, unfortunately, but there's always hope.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see a pushback to some degree on people who are using, and I don't fault people who use it as a tool if it's a tool that helps you to create or sparks an idea. I mean, people said the same thing about drum machines. They said the same thing about amps.
And keyboards is what, and the keyboards came out. That was blowing up. Like, oh my God, you're going to use keyboards? No, right?
Yeah, the electric guitar itself. Like, I mean. Right. Really, there's always been pushback against technology. It's when the technology becomes the thing, it overtakes the creative impetus. That's where it becomes problematic. And when it removes humans, once you remove the human element of it, how can it not lose its magic? I mean, as humans, we need each other, right?
Definitely have that experience together is what it's about. Not just sitting there the whole show on your phone. Be present, be with your friends. Like you were saying, in the old days, you would get together with your crowd and you would, do your pre-party for whatever concert you were getting ready for, and it was the experience of just hanging with your friends and having that experience. Not just, now the experience is, like I was saying to somebody else, is recording the experience. That's the experience.
And also watching on a big screen, it's interesting. Half the time we're going to a concert and we're watching our heroes as they were in 1987 on a massive screen, as opposed to, I remember going to see Van Halen at the CNE Stadium with a pair of binoculars with my brother-in-law. And I think that's Eddie, or maybe that's a Dot. I don't know.
Right.
But the thrill of it all, you were still very connected, and it's wonderful what you can do with effects and technology these days. And, but it's like anything, the trade-off, right? But I always, no matter what at a concert, I'm still trying to look at those people on there. I still try and find the little dots on stage.
Yeah, definitely. And so back to the battle axis here, we're talking about the guitars, obviously. I have a lot of friends, obviously, guitar players, and we can see your collection behind you there. One never seems to be enough. It's like potato chips. You just can't have one. There's always another one that's unique in some way, shape, or form. Guitar players always have a stable of guitars behind them. Do you have a couple that are maybe some of your personal favorites, or something that you really had to search for hard? Or
yeah, man. Here, let me show you one here that's real special to me. This one is actually a signature model of mine that was made by Les Godfrey of Godfrey Guitars. It's called the SK2 Esquire, and this is like I call it the Jetsons guitar, right? Like it's half of a Fender Esquire, half of an Explorer, and Les has made me a couple of beautiful custom instruments here. Let me just grab another one. This one is the Voltes Mini V, and I love this one because it's evocative of kind of the Randy Rhoads
style, for sure. Yeah.
But really, I have to tell you, the inspiration came from a bottle of wine and watching Judas Priest, Fuel for Life, the Turbo concert, watching KK Downing, and then me phoning up Les or texting him on Instagram and saying, dude, I'll drop a commission right now. I need to get a mini V like KK Downing.
Right,
and then,
right.
Like that. And anyway, it's a wonderful guitar. So those are cool, man. But I've been so blessed, Robert, in my career. I've worked with BC Rich. I worked with Charvel and Jackson. I'm working with Godin guitars now. Like, they all do something different. And for me, I've had a wonderful, varied music career. I played with Nelly Furtado. I played with Helix and Gilby Clarke, Coney Hatch. I'm playing with Lee Aaron. I do session work. So I like not only the look inspires me to pick it up, but the sounds inspire me, and I like to have a different, different colors in my palette to paint with. Definitely to showcase, and especially sometimes that fits in a certain way with whatever artist you're with, whatever band you're with. Maybe you want to change it up. It's like having a different suit, right? Basically. And sometimes the artist doesn't like the suit you wore. And that sometimes it's got to be a little more low key. Right? Yeah, and I don't do low key real well sometimes. Yeah. So you mentioned some of the artists that you played with and you've done stuff with. Obviously, we had Leora on the show a while back. She's starting to tour, starting to do stuff. I'm a big fan, obviously, of all her work. She had to change her style a couple times, but still a killer artist for sure. Anything you can share with us about your time with her at all? Yeah, well, actually, I'm going to see her tomorrow. We're heading up to Sudbury, Ontario, which is in Northern Ontario here in Canada. We have a festival date at the Grace Hartman Amphitheater. We actually just played in Winnipeg and Edmonton with our friends Honeymoon Suite and Streetheart, some Canadian bands. And she has a new album coming out. I'm not going to say anything about it because she hasn't yet, but very happy with it. Fans will be very pleased. It's a bit of a gift for her fans, I believe. We've made some records together. I've had a wonderful time. We've toured Europe a bunch, done the Monsters of Rock cruise, we're busy and it's a wonderful band. Dave Reimer on bass, John Cody. Dave Reimer, actually an amazing guitar builder too, who builds incredible Explorer guitars. So there you go. Excellent. Very, very cool. Well, obviously, we're located very close to Canada, so we get to hear and see all that great music that you guys are doing up there. Obviously, you mentioned Honeymoon Suite. We're in Western New York. Oh, beautiful. My people.
Yep. So you mentioned, Honeymoon Suite, another band which is outstanding in my opinion, and of course Triumph, which just came back. We had Rick and Gil on the show,
Great.
before they kicked off the tour. Telling us a little bit behind the scenes of what was going to happen and how they were going to put that together. I caught their show out here, and I thought it sounded great. I really, really did. I thought Rick did a tremendous job, with what they had. And it was great to see that Triumph magic one more time. Yeah.
Man, Rick has been, Rick actually wrote a little blurb for me for the back of the book, and I talked to him in the book. He's become I'm proud to say a friend, and certainly has always been a mentor even before I knew him and had a chance to play with him. He's such a wonderfully diverse, considerate artist, and such a lover of guitar music in general. He's always teaching me something. Every day he teaches me something new, sends me a little bit of information that just kind of opens my mind. And man, he played with so much fire. I didn't get a chance to see a show in person, but I certainly caught a lot of it. And I actually was just talking with Brent Fitz this weekend. Fitz was playing drums alongside with Gil. And, he just told me what a positive, incredible experience the whole thing was. So I'm so happy for them.
Yeah, definitely. I'm as well. It was so great to have him on a couple times. And you're right, just such a genuine guy, a genuine artist. I would say a musician's musician. Yeah. He just loves what he does. And when he came out with some of his stuff, I guess his publicist wanted him to come out with the notes from the current project that he was working on, kind of give people behind the scenes of some of the writings of the songs. And he wasn't sure about that. He's like, do people want to see this? I'm like, they want to see the creation process. That's amazing for people to see. But yeah, just very, very cool stuff. Obviously, we love stuff that's going on in Canada. We're glad it's getting a little bit easier for you folks to come here to the U.S. and do your shows and do things. I know that was a really tough time, a little crazy. Let's hope moving forward that continues to get better for sure.
You know what? Here's what I'll say. I'm a proud Canadian, and I'm a big believer in Canadian sovereignty, and obviously. But you know what? Our relationship with the people of the United States, that never changes. Music brings us together, right? And we still stay connected. And it is through music, I think, we'll change a lot of this. Politicians will be politicking, but we need to stay connected to each other. We share that bond, and so many great American artists have inspired me over the years. And like you just said, how what you think about our great Canadian artists. It's important to keep that in mind, and I think music can be that bridge. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back and reconnecting again with our American friends who I know respect and love us.
Yeah, definitely very, very cool. All right. So thank you so much for giving us a peek into the journey within your book, Battle Axes, a hard rockin' history of Pointy guitars. All right. Available August 25th, but you can pre-order now. And we'll also have the link on our website, talkingboutrock.com, to order the book here from Sean Kelly. Sean, thank you so much for being with us, man. Really appreciate it.
A real pleasure, Robert, and thank you. All the best, my friend.
All right. And to our audience out there, we hope you're doing your part by keeping the torch alive and supporting live music wherever you are.